What's going on, people? This is your man, Big Stu, Scott Stewart, or Professor Stewart, depending on how you know me. Welcome to another episode of Dope People Podcast. And I am super excited to have someone with us today who I give a lot of credit to for being the man that I am today, particularly in education. I want to introduce you all to a dope person. Affectionately in Chicago, goes by the name of Mr. G, more professionally known as Mr. Bill Gerstein. Mr. Bill Gerstein, welcome to the Dope People Podcast.
Thank you. I am equally excited about being on this show with you.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people, educators, and just all around human beings.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I do not receive that lightly. We have history. We have great history. I met you at the beginning of my Chicago public schools career. Do you remember how we met?
Yes. I'll tell you my memory of it.
All right, hold that. We'll come back to that as long as you remember that. Before we get started, we are doing every time we get to know the guest, because this is about you, right? So we'll circle back to how we first met, but let's introduce the people to you through a friendly round of this or that. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
You're familiar with how this or that works, right?
No, never played this or that.
Oh my goodness. This is going to be great. This is fun. The first round of this or that. Do you prefer nights on the town or quiet evenings at home? This or that? Nights on the town or quiet evenings at home?
Quiet evenings.
Okay. All right. Public education or private education?
Public education.
Winters or summers?
Summers.
Okay. All right. We're going to go a few more rounds. Audiobooks or paper books?
Paper books.
Okay. TV shows or podcasts?
Depends how you want to define TV shows. I no longer have a television.
Streaming shows or podcasts?
I like them both, but it depends. I like great podcasts, and there are some really good streaming shows, but I listen to more podcasts than I watch streaming shows.
Principals or teachers?
Teachers.
Oh, I don't want to get you in any trouble.
You can get me in trouble.
I know, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We can say what we want to say without getting.
Well, let me know if you want me to expound on that one at any point in this.
We will. We actually will. These last two. So
okay.
Remember, I said teachers or principals. He said teachers, unions or non-unions.
Unions.
Wow. Well, let's back into it. Why teachers versus principals? And it doesn't mean that you have less respect for principals. I'm assuming we're not talking about that. It's just
I'll try to explain in this answer.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, the hardest job in education is teaching. In fact, the hardest job is to teach anybody anything. It's a very difficult thing to do, to get other human beings to learn. Having said that, what I learned, because I was a teacher for 8 years prior to owning a supermarket, which I did for many years. When I came back into education after selling my business, I wanted to start high schools that would better serve young people. And I went into a principal ed program. And there are a few exceptions to this, but what I learned was most people who wanted to become principals, most, not all, wanted to get out of the classroom because it was the hardest job in education. And the reason they wanted, and I'll be quick on this one, they wanted more money, more power, and a better pension. That's why I like teachers. And now, do I like every single teacher? No. Do I dislike I like lots of principals. They were my colleagues. But in general, I have a lot more respect for teachers. Without them, you have nothing in a school system.
And you were a principal as well.
Yes.
What made you, because you were, by your students, from my experience, by your students and by your teachers, you were overwhelmingly adored, admired, respected. Why was that?
Well, it's real simple. You have to be, first of all, you have to be humble, you have to be respectful, and you have to understand the power structure. I mentioned I spent many years in retail grocery, and I always try to reverse the pyramid. I was there to, as a supermarket owner and manager, I had to support the people who put groceries on the shelves and served my customers. The customer was number one. In education, if you want to call it a customer, you're there to serve the students. And I needed to support my teachers so they could support the students. If I mistreated my teachers, they would mistreat the students, and it was all about the students. And I generally like, I don't know if like's the best word, but, I had, I tried to have a real understanding of what teenagers were going through. So even when they were being difficult, I always understood it was a tough time in their development. And I say this as being a parent and as somebody who employed lots of teenagers in my store. My store could not have been as successful as it was without the teenagers that worked there. And I love to brag about the great teams that worked at Mr. G's, but I also like to brag about the students who at South Shore and then eventually at Austin who I got to serve also. So that's the way I look at the world.
Yeah. So what, as you were admired, respected, adored by teachers and students on the South and West Side, you're an entrepreneur, right? You come from an entrepreneurial background, which is great. We share that commonality, but there's also, sometimes I remember some frustrations you dealt with as a principal, dealing with the higher ups, the people in charge.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about why was that so challenging? If you're serving your teachers and you're serving your students and everybody's loving you, you're getting the numbers, you got the performance, you got the attendance, what was your challenge as a principal? Why was that so challenging for you?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the it's working in a bureaucracy. I have an extremely difficult time working in a bureaucracy because bureaucracies are set up in order to create structures by which people have to abide by. And as being an entrepreneur, I was always trying to be creative, trying to serve my community, my parents, my students. And there were a number of times when I ran up against the indifference and hostility of those in the bureaucracy who were more interested in what I mentioned before about why people become principals. Well, a lot of people rise up through the bureaucracy, a lot, not all, because they want to get away from schools and they want to be able to tell principals what to do so that they can tell teachers what to do, so they can tell students what to do. And it's not that simple. So, but I didn't want to, I always try to figure out a way around or through a problem so that, so I could get resources and other things and money for the school so I could better serve the students. So you have to be real strategic and calculated And you got to have others sometimes fight your battles, like the community, the parents, and the teachers. So you live in an ecosystem, and it's like a high functioning school isn't the dictatorship of the person who serves as the principal. It's everybody kind of working together for a common goal. So I have a big belief in that, and I tried to follow that, and always reflect on what am I here for.
Did that cost you? So let's just dig in.
No, it didn't cost me.
Yeah.
You know what it cost me? I never got high up in the bureaucracy because I didn't play that bureaucratic game. I always got along with people at the top. Like I was friends with Arnie Duncan, and there were, you got to be strategic. So you don't want to die on a sword for, some BS because you don't like some, mid-level manager. You just figure out a way around it to do the best you can for the school community. So I never got in any real trouble. I think I was written up once, by a network chief. And I knew what he was trying to get me to do. He was trying to let me know he was in charge of me. So I allowed him to do that, and life moved on, and I ended up having a good relationship with him. But working in a bureaucracy is very difficult for people like me and most entrepreneurs.
You are a well-read individual. You introduced me. Before I met you, I wasn't as well-read, and I tell the story all the time. I was an average student on my best day, but it had very little to do with my intelligence. So I want to back into this question a little bit. Do you remember how we met? Can you tell from your,
I'll tell you
your memory of how we met?
My memory was this. I was at South Shore High School trying to organize a school that was going to use the theme of entrepreneurship. And but we didn't have anybody on the staff other than me, and I was just the principal, who really embodied the entrepreneurship ethos. And as I was looking to hire people, because we started slowly, there was a man in CPS. This is again my memory, this is your memory, named Al Brown. And Al Brown worked, he was kind of an entrepreneur also, and I was a longtime friend of his. And he said, there's this great teacher over at Dunbar named Scott Stewart. And he strongly encouraged me to contact you. I don't remember the first meeting, but specifically, but what I was blown away by your, commitment to serving kids, to wanting to be part of basically a startup of a school that used entrepreneurship as a theme. And you told me a little bit about your frustrations over at Dunbar, how they, they didn't really want to, kind of explore the entrepreneurship thing. And anyway, and I think I remember also there were some issues making sure that you got fully certified. So I remember working with Al to make sure that you were able to, in the bureaucracy, you were able to be certified in a way that allowed you to do it. And I also remember that you go into this years later, when you ended up at Gwendolyn Brooks. You want to talk about that also? Because I remember some of those.
We'll dig into
battles also. But I always tried to do whatever I could to support the career of Mr. Scott Stewart.
Well, thank you for that.
Because you are, I'm going to turn this around on you. There are not many. You look at. I love teachers. There are a lot of good teachers, but there's some that are better than others. And your passion for teaching, your passion for kids, your passion for using entrepreneurship as a tool to build kids up. And I loved. So I was always willing to take any. If you remember this too, we took a lot of risks.
Oh man.
Oh man. For your listeners, for dope people here, we had basically a we basically opened up a market at South Shore High School. It was like Maxwell Street in a way.
Yeah.
And
we can say one of the things that the district that we work, one of the things that Chicago Public Schools wasn't a support of students making money. And we saw that, I saw that as like, you gotta let these kids make money. Like, this is what life is about. You gotta let them figure out how they're gonna earn.
It's what entrepreneurs are. They're motivated. They wanted money in their pockets.
They wanted money in their pockets.
And they wanted it as quickly as possible. Now, then they use that to help them figure out how to manage expenses and come up with a marketing strategy. But what motivates almost every entrepreneur is they want some cash in their pocket or money in their bank account. Now it's Bitcoin or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we're talking legal money here.
Legal money. And look, if a kid can make, even today, if a kid can make 30 to 50 bucks a week legally at school while learning, I find that to be a major win. You talk about impact. So let's dig into what is.
Can I add one more thing to that about the bureaucracy?
Yeah.
When we were exploring this, I was told about the money. And I guess the statute of limitations is up now, so they can't throw me in jail for tax fraud or CPS fraud. But I was told the proper way of handling the money was the money should all go to one person should collect the money, give it to the school clerk, who puts it in the bank, accounts for every single penny, and then you got to file for some kind of you have to go through the bureaucracy in order to issue out something back to the students, but it couldn't be cash. It could be it could be like a Target card. I don't know if we had Target back then, but it could be a gift card.
It was a gift card. It could be a gift card. And I thought that was just like reinforcing consumerism. It wasn't enforcing financial accountability or the choice for students. And it definitely wasn't supporting generating wealth.
But I wanted to make sure there was cash controls, because a big issue in any kind of cash business is what happens to the cash. So, but that's the real world also. What happens to the cash? How do you account for your money? So I was trying to do a real world exploration of that. And but I was willing to get my hand slapped. I was waiting for somebody to slap my hand and say, "Oh, Bill, you can't do it that way." And then I would have said, "Oh, I'm very sorry." I would have pledged innocence and said, "Oh, just give me the rules. I'll follow the rules next time."
Yeah, we took a lot of risk, and for the sake of kids, and we made some mistakes, but I feel like we had far more wins than we had losses. Bill, what is the difference between educational systems when you were a student, elementary school, high school student, and what it needs to be today? What's the difference between what it was and not what it is, what it needs to be?
I'll try to make it relatively simple, and I hope I don't go on too long in this. But okay, so back in the day, I grew up in South Shore also, and the system was very segregated back then. Luckily for me, I grew up at a time when the neighborhood changed. So, South Shore High School changed dramatically racially during my tenure there in the late 60s. Okay, so you had a neighborhood-based system. It was very segregated. The education was pretty traditional in terms of the courses you took and how the courses were taught. You didn't have the only selective enrollment schools back then that I remember was one on the south side, Lindblom, and one on the north side, Lane Tech. And then you had some voc ed schools that were allegedly only for the kids who couldn't read well, like CVS, Dunbar, whatever. So I think what you have now is, to jump to now, and if you want to get into how it developed, but you got a highly stratified system where you got a few kids getting a great education at select schools that they have to test into. There are very few neighborhood elementary high schools on the south and west side that people choose to send their children to. Anybody with a choice will find a school somewhere else. So for example, on the south side, the one school everybody wants their child to get into is Kenwood Academy. Okay. People will avoid schools like Harlan, like Fenger, like Corliss, Julian, you name it. Hirsch, like Hirsch probably has 50 kids left in it. So you got a stratified system in which you have economic inequality, you got inequality. So and there are a lot of reasons for this. And you also, I've just referenced the voc ed schools. Well, the voc ed schools could be an important part of a high school system if they were better organized and run. And, what bothers me a lot is that those schools are really dying. Like CVS is dying. Dunbar, I think, has got 300 or 400 students left in it. Simeon kind of does okay, but it's kind of not the career and technical ed school it used to be. So I would love to see a high school system, for example, that really was set up for the students that we have to get as many of them into careers where they make money and build back the economic well-being of the city. And we don't have that right now. And I see not much. And this is a criticism I've had of my, CPS. And I know a lot of people still at CPS, but, the voc ed, current technical ed part of it is kind of the stepchild. And also educational pedagogy, that bothers me too. I'll end on the pedagogy thing. So kids who go to the so-called better schools, they get more opportunity to do what I call real education. They do project-based learning. They learn science, okay? They have extracurricular activities. Kids who go to the schools that are for the low-income kids without much choice, they get drill and kill. It's all about order and control. And, they rarely teach, elementary and high school. For a couple of years at CPS, after I retired from CPS, I would do some work for them as retired principal. And I went to many schools in the South and West Side that were in academic trouble. And very few of them taught history, taught science. Very few of them really taught math. It was drill and kill and order and control. And I think we could do a lot better. And also, one more thing, I could go on and on about this, but teachers. So a good school has a mixture of teachers who are young and energetic and old and veteran, but still know their stuff, okay? A lot of schools I would go visit had teachers who were very inexperienced, and then a lot of the older teachers who, too many of them were just tired and they were worn down by the system. And it really showed itself in the culture of the school. Whereas schools like, again, using Kenwood as an example, love Kenwood, they were able to get the best. But let me do one more shout out to, I think, the first guest on this podcast, Beulah McLeod. She started a school almost from scratch, Diet.
Yeah.
And I watched the start of that, and her gift at working with the community, hiring the right teachers, inspiring her students. I can't say enough good things about Beulah McLeod. I am in awe of her as an educational leader. So I hope she listens to this, because I'm a huge fan of hers, and I hope she's got, I know she's got a really interesting thing she's doing now, and I just hope she keeps doing even more for more students. So
yeah, there's a lot that I want to touch in. There's a lot that I want to touch on there. So one, I want to back up a little bit. you talked about, you gave that great reference to the transition of education from when you were a student till today. What are principals' hands tied, or are they just unwilling to fight the good fight?
Okay.
I mean, and in Chicago Public Schools, you have a lot of young principals now too. So
well, let me tell you about that.
Yeah.
I referenced why people become principals. Okay. And again, there are some really good ones, and there's some ones who do it only for the power money and getting out of the classroom. I think the big issue now is metrics. So you're judged as a principal a lot by these metrics, and the metrics are not well thought out. And if you are a principal of a school that serves students who are struggling academically and socially and emotionally, in one of the, I call them the default neighborhood schools, it's extremely difficult to hit those numbers. And a lot of principals under so much pressure that they narrow the curriculum. They do whatever they can to hit those numbers without, I think, creating a student-centered environment. They're looking more for the numbers, less about how do I help that young person become a better citizen, adult, part of their community. And so I think the pressures on principals based on how they are judged and how they are hired create a lot of the problems that you see.
And who's determining the measurement, the metrics for hiring and rating, evaluating principals?
Well,
the mayor?
Principals, in order to be eligible to be on what they call the principals list, you have to go through you have to have, certain courses, go through a certain program. It's not easy to be eligible. Then you get hired by a local school council, and then they give you a contract. But there are a lot of schools that are under on probation, and the local school council has not as much power over the principal. So the network chief. So principals report to a network chief, and they have lots of power over that principal also.
So I want to go back. You referenced Beulah McLeod, who was the inaugural first guest on Dope People Podcast, a podcast where we highlight some of the dopest people in education specifically. But you've also you've been a part of a lot of amazing dope people. Dr. Janice Jackson was one of your teachers.
She was a teacher at South Shore, as you remember.
I do.
Hey, I might be one of the only people that I got to sit in on her classes often as a teacher. She was a great principal. And I should add, I get this in here, she taught entrepreneurship at South Shore High School. She was certified in the NIFTY curriculum.
That's right.
So whenever people ask me about Janice Jackson, I always say she was one of the best teachers I have ever seen. And I did whatever I could to advance her career. And I love her to death. I think she's a great human being.
What contributes, and also let's not forget, there are a host of students who've come up through you, whether through Mr. G's, your entrepreneurial endeavor at the grocery store in Hyde Park, or through, your work at South Shore, your work at Austin. You have a host of amazing, dope teachers and amazing, highly successful students to come through kind of the Mr. G's ranks. Give me a story or an example of a student or a teacher, either one, somebody that you just, are so delighted with, so excited about having come through your tutelage over the years. Do you have any that kind of stick out immediately that you kind of just, you can't get them out of your head of how well they've done or doing now?
Yeah, well, let me bring up somebody that you actually know and helped you out at South Shore. I'm going to mention Guion Foreman. Okay, there are a lot of people I could talk about. So I've known Guion since he was a young adolescent. I think 12 or 13. I knew his family, and he, he was always very, besides all these soft skills, like, he was a serious young person, but also a fun young person. He was not a nerd, but, he was real interested in business. And, he ended up going to Florida A&M and majored in business. And then went to the University of Chicago, got an MBA. He started, several businesses, became very successful. He was a developer, but he's always thinking like a businessman, but he also was willing to give back. So when I got to South Shore to do the entrepreneurship school, I asked him to help some of the young people there and work with you. And if you recall, he took, I think, 4 young men, and they weren't, I'm not saying they were troubled. They were just regular young men who went to South Shore. They weren't our best. They weren't our worst. They were just real, they were struggling a little bit as students. And he not only helped them form a little business, if I recall, they were selling, they ended up selling like ice cones or whatever. But he was willing to work with them and help them, mature into young men. And I still see him all the time. He's teaching. In fact, 2 weeks ago, he asked me he's teaching a course at the Booth School at the University of Chicago. He asked me to talk to some of his grad students. And by the way, I should add, he also asked another former principal, Greg Jones from Kenwood, who also, by the way, taught at Dunbar, who is one of the, again, along with Beulah, one of the best. So me and Greg talked to, Guion's Booth School, students. So anyway, I'll mention him, but there's so many others. I think I also mentioned, yeah.
I wasn't expecting you. I didn't know who you would say, but one of the things that I want to acknowledge is there have been so many people that you've introduced me to. Many of those people I still keep in contact with, and Gion is one of them. I got a chance to, over the years, I ran into his mother doing some work. I know his brother. I've formed an amazing
great people. Hey, and his father is a great man. His father was a lawyer. He had a difficult stretch for a while, but he bounced back, and yeah, it's just a great family. Love them.
There is a student a student at Austin that I met, because I didn't teach. I didn't travel when you left to go to Austin. I left to go to Gwendolyn Brooks. And that fractured some of my relationship with the students, because some of them felt like I was abandoning them. When the new principal came, and I decided, and that principal was giving me a headache. We
won't talk about him. We won't mention his name.
I won't even mention his name. To be honest, I don't even remember his name.
He won't be on Dope People, will he? You will not be putting him on your show.
But I still keep up with some of those students. But one student I keep up with many of the students from South Shore for sure. That's why I really cut my teeth. But at Austin, I went over there and I met a gentleman, a young man, through the After School Matters program. Shout out to After School Matters. And I was working with Michael Levesque. And we met.
Oh yeah, another great man. You could put him on Dope People.
Oh,
he's
absolutely.
Really dope.
Yeah.
One of the smartest people I know.
Yeah, Michael Levesque was great. He's dope. But we met a young man by the name of Darius Anderson.
Oh yeah, I still talk to him.
Dice Ali. And he's one of the first. I still keep in touch with him heavily. He's one of my young guys. We are in constant communication. And Darius, I like to call him Dice as well. That's what he would prefer to be called. Is the epitome of what impactful educators and men and leaders can do in helping to transform the lives of young people who are willing to be transformed. This young man is married now. He has a couple of children. He has a beautiful home
Yep.
in the south suburbs.
Yep.
I'm not trying to paint it out like life is a cakewalk, but if it gets challenging, he calls me, and he is constantly giving credit. He's constantly reminding me of the work that the impact that you've had in his life, that Mr. Levesque's had in his life, his father, myself. And so that's what reminds me of why we do the work that we do. Mr. Gerstein, what would you like to say to principals, educational leaders, teachers? What would you like to say to them that would reinvigorate or remind them of what they're doing in the first place?
Oh, oh, what can I say? Okay.
What would you say?
They have to get a lot of noise out of their heads, because it's real. If you don't, okay, if you're not careful, you get sucked into a certain kind of drama where it's very easy to blame outside forces for whatever situation you're in. Yeah, our country's in bad shape. Yeah, we've got a very difficult history as a nation. The bureaucracy sucks. The politicians suck. The union is, they could do more, they could do less. To just think about those, the young people in front of them, and try to, how can you best serve them educationally and also as a human being? A lot of teachers will complain, they didn't hire me to be a social worker. They hired me to be a teacher. I'm supposed to just give out information. They got to get beyond that. And your job, at any kind of school, is to be more than just an expert in your field, And sometimes I try to refer to it as more like youth development. Teaching is part of youth development, and you want those young people to get to be age 18, and be ready for the next part of their life. And so you have to kind of like, as much as possible, not get sucked into the dysfunctions of our society and our bureaucracy. And it's real easy to get sucked into that. And then keep learning. And particularly if you're in a school that serves lower income students, they deserve the kind of education more affluent kids get. So before you do that drill and kill thing, there's a time and a place for that. But if that's all you're doing, not good. You got to keep, improving your practice, learning more so you could teach better. So you got to, anyway, treat it like a profession and a calling.
Mr. Gerstein, you are by far one of the most impactful educational leaders that I've ever had an opportunity to know and come in contact with. And I am super excited to have sat down with you in this forum to pick your brain and to let other people in on your wonderful mind as an entrepreneur and as an educator, particularly here in Chicago, where there's so much work to be done. That is all the time that we have for today. We both have to get on with our day. Thank you for chiming in for another edition of Dope People Podcast. This edition with Mr. William Gerstein, Mr. Bill Gerstein, Billy G, Mr. G from Chicago. Thank you so much. You already know what it is. Until next time, peace.
Yep. I hope. See you, Scott.